Hey MiniWarGamers, welcome to another episode of The Machine Shop with Ash. This is my weekly show about war games and war gamers. Today's topic, rules as written versus rules as intended. So if you didn't know what the acronym RaW and RaI mean, those are some popular internet forum acronyms for those two statements. So rules as written and rules as intended. Now those are two polar opposite stances on something that we all kind of hold near and dear, which is the rules for the war games that we play. Now, why did I want to talk about it? Well, it's come for a bunch of reasons. First of all, I did a show recently about Witchfire Powers, not recently, like a month ago or something like that, with Matt, where we talked about a certain psychic power when we were 40K, and I took the stance of the rules as written guy, and he took the stance of the rules as intended guy, and we debated, debate class style, the actual rule and its intent. But I think this is a topic worth exploring because, again, it comes down to people's personal preferences in wargaming. So not just, what the intent of the people writing the rules is, but how people want to experience what they're doing when they're playing a miniature wargame. So what I want to do today is talk about those two stances, talk about people who favor rules as written and then people who favor rules as intended. And try and explore why those people favor what they favor, and maybe get some common ground between the two sides. So let's take a look and talk about these two things. We're going to start off with rules as written. All right, so the rules as written crowd, man, they are the ones who see the ones and the zeros in the matrix going by. They see the world in binary terms. It is or it isn't possible. And so when it comes to following a rule, people who fall into the camp of rules, sort of the rules as written gamers, is they wish to experience playing the miniature war game completely within the parameters of what is written on the board. Even if that might seem from a real world or logical or sort of flavorful, sort of point of view, as absurd. A rule could create a situation where something slightly absurd takes place. A model or a unit behaves in a way that one might not think it would behave on the battlefield. But that's okay for someone who's playing rules as written, or whose sort of primary concern is rules as written, because what their concern is that the simulation goes off as intended, exactly as the designers intended it to go. And so they will be very tight and peruse the rules of the game. And this isn't just competitive play. So I don't want that to be made into a mistake. It's not so much about necessarily playing competitively, it's that the rules themselves are adhered to strictly that we kind of concern ourselves with right now. Now that can cross over into the land of competitive play, because in competitive play, we talked to someone playing to win. One of the things that you are trying to do is you are trying to use the rules completely to your advantage. And so very often those two things do overlap. Guys who are very into rules as written could also be, very competitive because they've made it their business to understand exactly how the rules work to maximize their advantages in the battlefield. And that's fine too. But that's where we come to when we talk about rules as written. So to give you an example of some things that would be adhered to exactly rules as written. Well, for instance, that argument we made earlier, which was Witchfire Powers. So if you take the Witchfire Power rule as written in the 40K rulebook, it very clearly in the foreword for Witchfire Power says that no matter what they are, unless they specify otherwise in the description for the power, they have to roll to hit. Now that creates a bunch of very strange scenarios where you don't entirely know how to proceed with some of the Witchfire Powers. Any of the Witchfire Powers that don't necessarily either have a template or a blast, because those follow the rules for those weapons, but don't have a weapon profile or a sort of normal standard statistic profile, they still technically, rules as written, have to roll to hit. And that can become confusing. But that's what's written in the book. So if you were to very literally follow the interpretation of the rules, you would have to figure out what that means and then abide by it. Another interesting rule is written, template weapons in the game 40K. In previous editions of the game, there was some very specific rules for how they would interact with buildings. So if a building had levels, how it would interact with levels, how to interact with hitting something that had like a floor between it and something else. And the rules have become very cut and dry. You place the template, you look down, all the models that are caught underneath the template are hit. So rules as written, again, that can create maybe not situations that don't entirely make sense, where a blast is, suddenly creating a pillar of explosion that's 18 inches tall or, massively big or whatever. And sorry, I can't do that because it just spins the template rather, but it can create situations where models are being hit through floors, through, things that don't necessarily make sense from a logical or an imagination point of view, right? If you're imagining this actually happening on the table in front of you, it can be kind of breaking the fourth wall and not making a certain amount of sense. So that's driving people who like the rules as written and who are in the rules as written camp. Now that can be for competitive reasons. That can simply be for reasons of completionism. Like some people are very into getting things right? They have driver to get things perfect and play the game exactly right. And so they attempt to follow the rules as strictly as they can, possibly to the letter. And so they tend to fall into this camp. So again, there's nothing good or bad about that. That's just the camp that those people exist in, and they want to see the world in ones and zeros and blacks and whites, which means that there's no middle ground. There's no gray, right? There's no space in between. There's just what's written on the page, and that is how we will proceed when we play our games. So let's talk about now the other camp. The other camp is the rules as intended camp. So the rules as intended camp. Now this camp is the camp that wants things to work the way that they believe it was intended by the writer. So when they encounter an inconsistency, so for instance, we'll go back to our example of the Witchfire powers, where there is a literal written rule where one has to roll to hit, and there's a description of a power that just says that the target takes X effect. They try and interpret what the people who are writing meant. And that's maybe not the easiest thing in the world to do. You have to try and step into the shoes of the person who is writing it, or the team of people even that were writing it, and psychically mind meld with them so that you can understand what they want, and probably in no small part to project what you would want onto that decision, and then come away with a ruling of a satisfactory sort of nature. So things that kind of get boiled into that too, let's think about where they're coming from. They tend to try and interpret things also in terms of the fluff. So how would it work in story terms in this imaginary universe that's being created in the battlefield? If this scenario were to occur, right, if I am witch firing somebody right here, I'm melting this person's brain. Do I really need to hit that or roll to hit that thing? I'm not aiming, I'm not looking at a gun sight or something like that. I'm just, sensing that person's brain over there and then melting it with my brain. That would help them in their sort of like quest for figuring out what was intended. Likewise, if that same sort of like ambiguous, what you can see through the template is what you hit, they might interpret it as, well, there's a floor in the way, so I can't see those models that are down there. And logically, the floor would protect them from the blast, so I probably can't hit them. And that, again, they might use the logic and the fluff sort of like interpretation to help color their decision-making as they try and figure out or parse what the writers of those rules intended. And so that tends to be what drives those people, is they want to get it right, but they want to get it right when there's an inconsistency in such a way that they feel it fits the vision and the flavor of that tabletop wargamer, or that sort of tabletop war game, or that designer, or even that game system's universe, right? That world that they're living in when they're playing a game, that sort of imaginary land. So there we have the impasse, right? We have a very literal interpretation of the rules, and the rules is written side. We have a very fluid and sort of based on lots of external factors, like what the story would be, what the physics of that world or universe are, what the circumstances and what the intent of even the writer might be based on other rulings or precedents or whatever. And they tend to butt heads. So now, here's the thing. Much like in lots of my other shows, I think that there's a very simple sort of like message here. So if you are a rules as written gamer, or you're a rules as intended gamer, neither of you are wrong. When you come to an impasse, neither of you are wrong. And in most miniature games, there's usually some type of proviso in the foreword you can check for when people come into disagreements. And I would say that no matter which of these two camps you sit into, you can probably, if you're playing a miniature game that's had the creators have had some forethought, you can probably find a section that's going to help you out when you come to a disagreement. And realize that you're coming to a disagreement for a reason. not because one of you is right and the other one's wrong, but because your desires on how to resolve the problem are different. The solution isn't as important to these two camps as the process that is taken to actually come to the decision of whatever the ruling is. So it's the journey, not the destination, that matters to both these different camps. And they want the other person to take that same journey, not necessarily to come to the same conclusion. So if you can find it, if it's in there, and I hope that every miniature game designer out there, that you do this in your books, that you assume that you are fallible and that you have not written a perfect set of rules, and that you put somewhere in the introduction is if you cannot come upon, the game state will create situations that the rules may or may not have allowed for, and then if you come upon such a situation, then you should X. Most Games Workshop games have a dice roll, just dice off and keep playing. Mercs has a great game called Err on the Side of Carnage. A great rule called Err on the Side of Carnage. If you can't agree upon what the rule is, whatever causes the most damage is the ruling that you have to take. So whatever causes the most stuff to die. Games like Malifaux will involve cutting cards and flipping to see who takes the action or who proceeds forward first. And that's a great thing, I think, in any rule set, is that there should be some way of basically resolving disagreements that you can get back to playing, especially in the case where the answer necessarily isn't even going to be able to be had, and it's more important maybe to the two people involved, the process that gets used to come up with the answer. That's actually really what they're invested in, not whatever the answer is, but how did we get that answer? And so there it is. If that's not in the book though, if the game that you're playing doesn't have some kind of proviso for basically getting back to playing and moving on, here is my suggestion. That's something you need to house rule. That is something that, as a social contract with you and your friends, your fellow wargamers, the people that you are spending to choose your leisure time with, indulging in an expensive, time-consuming, hard, grinding hobby, which is a lot of work to actually get to do, get back to having fun. Have some kind of social contract where if you can't figure it out, you get back to playing your game and you figure it out for next time, because that's going to make everybody's life way happier. So there it is. Here's Ash's talk about rules as written and rules as intended, and my plea and usual way of getting to solving a problem, which is have a previous agreement or a social contract as to how you should proceed when that happens. And remember, for the rules as written camp and the rules as intended camp, they don't care so much what the answer is. They care about how you got the answer. So have some empathy. That side isn't wrong. They just care more about why the answer is coming from, or how you're getting to the answer necessarily than they are what the final solution is going to be. And if you can create a methodology where everyone's just going to be happy because it's previously agreed upon, then you're going to have a better time. So there it is, another episode of The Machine Shop with Ash. We're going to get down to On the Paying Table now, so let's check out what I've been working on. All right, so here's the On the Paying Table for this week, what I've been working on. I got two things done, which is some guild guys. I got Captain Daciel. He's like the corrupt guild cop finished. He's all stubbly with some blood spatter on him, his big cleaver. He's yelling and screaming. Again, these guys are hard styrene. And I got Lucius, the governor's lawyer, done. This cool owl mask and his sword cane in some sort of like classic gray, red, and gold. So that's all finished. I finished up their bases too. The bases are plastic card with some Citadel texture paint painted around it, just kind of blended in. And then everything else from that group is base coated. I got my two sleazy looking guild lawyers all done, ready to bring the law down on people. And then, well, not done, but they're base coated and washed. I tend to do this as I get stuff base coated and washed, and I go back and finish them one at a time. This is one of my tricks for powering through stuff really fast. Is if everything's base coated and washed, then I can go back and I can usually finish up a model in like half an hour, 45 minutes. These are two guild guards. They're both base coated and washed too. They're pretty cool, and they're dusters. I got a redhead here, and Mr. Mustache, looking kind of like Kurt Russell in Tombstone. Some very cool miniatures. And then the Scribe, which is the totem, and he's got Lucius's extra owl mask there, so we can switch masks in case something goes wrong. He's just painted up in classic like butler outfit. Those guys will get done maybe this weekend. I'm not sure, but I'll hopefully get them done soon so I can start playing this game. And then I got more awesome Ariadnens finished. I need to expand my Ariadnens. So to finish my dog posse, I actually can only use two in a game, but I wanted the box. These models are just amazing. I have 2 more dog faces, and they can be used, I guess, as Caledonians or Cameronians, or Caledonians, I guess, Cameronians, something like that as well. These guys can also be Irmandinos, so you can use this box as a whole bunch of different things. So this is them in their human form. This is them once they transform, and they're all finished up. Base coating and washing. So once again, just like the guild guys, I'll go back and I'll add details to them and touch them up and finish their skin one-on-one, kind of as I need them in games. I have my unit of Kazakhs, so they're all base coated and washed as well. So they've just got their sort of basic colors slapped on, and once again they've been airbrushed just like everybody else for the greens, and then the basic colors have been slapped down and then washed. That's the Fort Observer there because he's got the radio, so he's calling in the airstrike. I got my tank hunter with the really cool auto cannon, so like the super huge auto cannon. He's ready to rock and roll, getting base coated. Then I got Isabel McGregor. It's the only hacker that Ariadne can actually take. She's a Spec Ops-y kind of intel chick. She's a defensive hacker, and that gives me some hacking options for the game, which is pretty handy too. So she's base coated and washed. And then next up, I got some more scenery to do. I got to send a big thanks to the guy at Piazza Productions, an Etsy store. He does these CNC laser etched cargo containers. This is for my infinity table at home. And he did them with my logo on it. So isn't that cool? I just sent him a pic with the logo, and he CNC'd it on the sides. There's some shameless promotion right there for my channel. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you'll get to see this in the game, some cool containers. And they're nice. He does a set, I guess, of 8 of them. Check him out, Piazza Productions on Etsy, and he will do you some cargo containers. And he can even do logos, apparently, too. So check it out. So there it is. There's my on the painting table for this week. Only 2 models actually finished, but lots of work just getting stuff base coated and slammed down so that I can power through them soon enough. Some scenery, and then some fantasy stuff, and some infinity stuff, and there we go. So I hope you enjoyed my on the paint table for this week in January. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Machine Shop about the 2 camps, rules as written versus rules as intended, and my on the painting table for this week. If you want to hit me up and talk about either this topic or give me suggestions for other topics, future topics, whatever, you can talk to me here in the comments on YouTube or on my own YouTube channel or on Facebook, which is facebook.com/outofthebasement-into-the-streets. I rely on you guys to inspire me with topics and stuff like that and get my brain boiling to give me things to talk about in my show. I'll be back next week for more Machine Shop. The week after that, though, I'll be taking off because I am having another baby. So, well, not me personally, although I might look like I am. My wife and I are having another baby in 2 weeks, I think the 11th. So I should be taking a week off after that, just to, keep her sane and do all the things that good fathers and husbands do. So I'll see you next week for more Machine Shop. Hit me up and chat at me about this topic and other future topics. And until then, happy wargaming.